Larry King was nothing less than an American institution, known for his tough, direct, and fair interviews with heads of state, politicians, and movie stars. He was just as open and frank about his tumultuous personal life. This is the tragic real-life story of Larry King. Larry King wasn't always Larry King. He was born in 1933 in Brooklyn, New York, where he spent his entire childhood and early adulthood into his 20s under his birth name of Lawrence Harvey Zeiger. His father, Aaron, ran a popular working-class neighborhood bar and grill. He had a close relationship with his son, Lawrence, which made the tragedy of June 9, 1943 all the more terrible. According to his book, My Remarkable Journey, young Larry King was walking home from the library when he saw 3 police cars in front of his apartment building, hearing his mother screaming as he got closer to his home. He was stopped by a policeman who informed the 9-year-old that his father had died of a heart attack. The elder Zeiger was only 44 years old. As his father was the primary breadwinner for the family, which also included King's younger brother, the family's economic situation became dire, and they had to enroll in welfare programs to get by. His father's death and its fallout sent the future Larry King into a spiral of sadness, and his schoolwork suffered so much for so long that college became out of the question. King managed to graduate high school and worked a series of odd jobs to support his mother and brother before he decided to head to Miami and pursue his dream of working in radio.
All my life I've dreamed of being on the radio. I never wanted to be anything else but a broadcaster.
Larry Zeiger moved to Miami in 1957. By 1959, he had transformed himself into local star Larry King. His endeavors in the media expanded to include multiple radio gigs, several TV shows, and columns for 3 Miami newspapers. In short time, King was earning a comfortable living, but he blew a lot of his income at the horse track and also overspent in attempts to keep up with his free-spending celebrity friends who frequently visited and performed in Miami. One prominent friend was a money man named Lou Wolfson, who financed the King talk show in the 60s. That arrangement fell apart when Wolfson was investigated and then convicted for stock fraud. King, in his position as a media figure, had become friendly with the newly elected President Richard Nixon, who offered to help get Wolfson exonerated. Nixon gave the case to incoming Attorney General John Mitchell, who declined to take on Wolfson as a client. But according to the Sun-Sentinel, King told Wolfson that Mitchell had agreed to work the case anyway, leading a thrilled Wolfson to give King thousands of dollars with which to pay Mitchell's firm. Instead, King used that money to pay off some of his many creditors. King later called this, quote, one of the biggest mistakes of my life.
But yeah, money was, we all have weaknesses of various stripes. Mine was the dollar.
King eventually came clean, but when Wolfson was released from prison in 1971, he filed a legal complaint citing a theft of $5,000. King tried to pay back the money without facing further consequences, but Wolfson didn't want it. Instead, King was arrested and lost his multiple jobs. The charges were ultimately dismissed, but the damage to his reputation had been done. King had barely worked in the media for 4 years before it all fell apart, and it might have stayed that way too, if a new general manager hadn't signed on to the WIOD radio station and offered him another chance at hosting a talk show. Larry King was married a notable number of times, 8 times to 7 wives. Things didn't work out over and over again, a pattern established in early adulthood with his first couple of attempts at marriage. King married for the first time in 1952 to Freda Miller, his high school sweetheart from Brooklyn, barely after he graduated. A year later, the couple's parents forced them to annul the marriage. When he moved to Miami in his early 20s, he met a woman named Annette Kay. As King claimed in his 2009 memoir, not only was his wedding with Kay a secret, the marriage was too. He wrote, I never told anybody about the first time I got married in Florida, not even my brother. There was no wedding party. I was this young kid and I got into an affair with a beautiful woman 10 years older than me. Annette was married when she first took up with King, and after the mother of 3 ended her already problematic marriage, she told King that she'd ended that relationship because of King, and that as a result he should feel obligated to marry her. As King put it, quote, she could be very controlling and I was never good at saying no. Larry King became a radio star in Miami in the 1950s and 60s. During one broadcast, he had a few Playboy bunnies on the show, including a woman who brought her 20-year-old cousin and future bunny Aline Akins. King wrote in his memoir, My Remarkable Journey, that he was instantly attracted to Akins. The couple married a few months after King divorced Annette Kay, but this marriage was doomed too, ending in 1963 after King formally adopted her young son, Andy. After they split, King introduced Akins to a friend, and they hit it off and moved to Iowa. As King wrote, it was a blow to my ego, which might explain why I rebounded by marrying a woman who worked at the radio station. That marriage also didn't last. According to People, his 4th wife was named Mickey Sutphin, and she was married to King for 3 years, during which time they had a daughter. Sutphin reportedly left King for another man, and she took custody of the kid, formerly adopted by this new guy. King soon found love again, this time remarrying Akins, who soon thereafter gave birth to their daughter Kaya. Nevertheless, King and Akins would split a second time for good in 1971. Larry King had two major habits in his life: getting married and chain smoking. In his memoir, he admitted to a 3-pack-a-day cigarette habit. King smoked profusely from the 1950s up until the late 1980s, when he was forced to quit by a major health scare. In February 1987, he experienced a heart attack just after his 53rd birthday. Also contributing to the frightening cardiac event was the fact that he worked long and stressful hours, ate too many fried foods and desserts, and didn't get much exercise. Even though his own father had died of a heart attack at age 44, King didn't think he was at risk for one. Like many, he thought bad health was the kind of thing that just happened to other people. He was so sure of his own fortitude that he ignored earlier warning signs that a heart attack was coming, such as shortness of breath and chest pain, chalking up the symptoms to nothing more than mere heartburn. But that morning in 1987, he experienced stomach pain and an achy shoulder, and after smoking one more cigarette, he checked into a hospital in Washington, D.C., where doctors told King that he was in the middle of a heart attack. To bring King back from the brink, the hospital administered a blood clot eradicating drug that had yet to be approved by the FDA, a treatment that required King to sign a waiver, freeing the hospital of all liability should he die as a result of it. With little to lose and everything to gain, he rolled the dice on the experimental treatment, which worked and saved his life. If it isn't obvious by now, Larry King really liked to get married, particularly to blonde women younger than himself. King followed his second divorce from Aline Atkins with a wedding to production assistant and math teacher Sharon Lepore in 1976. They split up in 1983, after which King would wait 6 years before marrying again. But when he found his next spouse, he acted quickly. In the summer of 1989, King met Philadelphia-based businesswoman Julie Alexander. They went on a date on August 1st, and King proposed that evening. They were married in October of that year, but the marriage didn't make it, possibly because the couple rarely saw one another. Alexander remained in Philadelphia, while King remained near his workplaces in Washington, D.C. They separated in 1990 and formally divorced 2 years later. The next woman to steal King's heart, at least temporarily, B-movie actress Deanna Lund, to whom the radio and TV host proposed after 5 weeks of dating in 1995. They split up before the ceremony. In 1997, it seemed like King had finally found his happily ever after when he married Shawn Southwick, a singer and TV show host 26 years his junior. While this relationship proved to be King's longest-lasting marriage, it wasn't particularly peaceful. In April 2010, King filed for divorce in the wake of a National Enquirer report that Southwick had engaged in an affair. But they didn't go through with the divorce. Not ready to split, the couple reconciled. 6 years later, they faced trouble again for the same reasons, with Southwick allegedly carrying on a lengthy affair. Both King and Southwick denied any infidelity on either of their parts and stayed married, for a while. In August 2019, King once again filed divorce papers. A few months later, King told People that what ultimately destroyed the relationship wasn't affairs. He shared, "The age difference eventually takes its toll."
But now, now it hits me. I'm 86. She's 60. And she's a young 60.
Larry King's health problems didn't end with his heart attack in 1987. The same year he'd had his heart attack, he was also diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. 12 years later, he faced a diagnosis of prostate cancer. Years later, he'd fight cancer once more. In 2017, at the age of 83, King was diagnosed with stage 1 lung cancer. The cancer was so new as to be asymptomatic, so King considered himself lucky that the routine X-ray had spotted the tumor early on. King soon underwent surgery to get the malignant growth removed, and he was back to work after just about a week of convalescence. While working throughout 2019, King had a few severe health scares, including a stroke which rendered him comatose, gave him amnesia, and took away his ability to use his left foot. The devastating, debilitating series of events led King to consider ending his own life.
I thought I was just going to bite the bullet. I didn't want to live this way. I didn't want to live dependent on others.
Larry King was best known for his years of consistent television hosting work, but he was a radio man first, and his success in that medium is what led to his entry into the world of TV. In 1985, CNN founder Ted Turner asked King to take his act, one-on-one interviews with politicians and famous people and inviting callers to ask questions to his still new and developing cable TV network. The nightly Larry King Live became one of CNN's signature and most important shows. History happened on the show, including Ross Perot announcing his upstart presidential campaign there in 1992, and Middle East leaders Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin coming on the show to discuss peace talks in 1995. In 2010, it all went away when King announced that he would be ending the long-running series later that year. He wrote in a statement, "I talked to the guys here at CNN and I told them I would like to end Larry King Live, the nightly show, this fall, and CNN has graciously accepted, giving me more time for my wife and I to get to the kids' Little League games." Despite the classy seeming exit, the reasons behind the end of Larry King Live may not have been so clear-cut. According to The Wrap, the ratings for the show had dropped by 43% over the previous year. A CNN source also explained that other factors were considered behind the scenes when it came to ending the show. The insider claimed, "What brought this to a head was his messy personal life, and he's old. It's too much." In addition to his many marriages over the years, Larry King also became a father 5 times over. He was dad to sons Chance and Cannon with Sean Southwick, and also had a son named Larry King Jr. with Annette Kay in 1961, though he didn't actually meet Jr. until 1994. King married Eileen Atkins 2 separate times in the 1960s. During the first marriage, he adopted Atkins' young son Andy, and after they divorced and remarried, they had a daughter together named Kaya. Unfortunately, King's sprawling family was tragically touched by death twice in 2020. On August 22, 2020, King announced via social media channels that both of his children with Atkins, Andy King and Kaya King, had passed away that summer. According to the statement, Andy King passed away after suffering a heart attack on July 28th, while Kaya died on August 20th, not long after receiving a lung cancer diagnosis. After the deaths of his children, King wrote, "Losing them feels so out of order. No parent should have to bury a child." Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite cultural icons are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.